The birth of Chidera brought so much joy to Arinze and I. I was beginning to forget everything about my past, forget everything about Victoria. We had moved to Oka a few months after her birth. Since my mother was very busy in Enugu, my unmarried older sister, Patricia, had come to take care of me and my baby in Oka. Arinze was a very hardworking man. He worked as a civil engineer and would often oversee the construction of buildings, mostly for big men who were either politicians or wealthy businessmen. He traveled a lot, sometimes to Lagos, Abuja, or Port Harcourt to complete projects, leaving me behind with Chidera. I soon got busy with church activities as I registered with the Catholic Women Organization in our parish. I just want to find something meaningful to do while he's away, I had told Patricia one evening while rocking Chidera in my arms. She had smiled as she sliced onions for dinner. You've always been good at finding your feet anywhere. I'm sure you'll be the CWO president in no time. I chuckled. Let me just survive my first meeting first. It wasn't exactly easy. The women in the meeting were mostly snobbish toward me, for reasons best known to them. Conversations would fall silent when I walked past. They smiled with their lips, not their eyes, and mostly spoke in hushed tones I wasn't invited into. Only Caroline, Sister Caro, was nice, friendly even. She made genuine efforts to know me beyond the casual hello and have you paid your dues that usually accompanied every gathering. After one particularly long meeting that had devolved into an argument over whose turn it was to clean the church altar, she pulled me aside as we walked down the church steps. I live not too far away, she said, adjusting the veil on her head. With a bike, it would only take 3 naira to my place. Oh, I blinked, a bit surprised by the sudden warmth. That's not far at all. She gave a soft laugh. Anytime you need me, feel free to come over. You know, I've been married longer than you, and I have children already in secondary school. Boarding schools, in fact. I nodded politely. You're a new mother, so I know what it feels like, especially since your husband is, you know, usually busy working. The way she said it, her voice just on the edge of pity, I should have understood she was deeper than what she seemed on the surface. There was something in her eyes, something observant, knowing. Thank you, I said quietly, genuinely. I appreciate that. That day, I returned home thoughtfully. When I got back, Chidera was sleeping, her tiny lips parted slightly. One hand curled over her head like she was making a baby sized vow. Onyeka, our house help, was in the backyard, busy washing the baby clothes and napkins. Madam, welcome, she called from where she squatted by the basin. Thank you, Onyeka. Is she sleeping long? Yes, ma, almost 1 hour now. I stepped inside, set my paws on the table, and quietly entered the bedroom. I watched my daughter for a few seconds, then sat gently on the edge of the bed. Sometimes, just for the sake of nostalgia, I would read those letters Victoria and I used to send back and forth. Letters written in hurried ink and soft heartbreak. I reached for the small box I kept at the bottom of my wardrobe and opened it with a quiet reverence. It was late June 1999, over 5 years since I received the last letter. Sometimes, when Chidera was asleep and my husband away on business, I'd go through it, flipping every word, every sentence, hoping for a clue, some hidden meaning, something that would give me closure. But nothing, nothing at all seemed out of the ordinary in that last letter. In fact, she had promised to write again the following week to complete a gist about her neighbor and a dog. I smiled through my tears, the memory too strange and sweet to hold without feeling it crack in my chest. I hope you are okay, I whispered to no one, wherever you are. Arinze returned from his trip later that week very excited. Honey, guess what? He had started suddenly after swallowing a morsel of the pounded yam and vegetable soup I had prepared, knowing he'd be back that day. What's that? I asked casually, feeding Chidera some golden morn as I sat in the living room just opposite the dining table where my husband sat. So during this trip, our company got in contact with some state officials and got a contract to reconstruct. Honey, you won't believe this. The State House of Assembly building. I instantly dropped the spoon in the bowl of golden morn and stood up excitedly, swaying into a dance before rushing over to hug him. Wow, that's such a big one. He smiled, clearly pleased. Yes, it is. Kenneth, my brother, is good friends with the PA to the governor, so he was able to get me in. Then he added, Ahem, that reminds me. The PA invited us for dinner in 2 weeks' time at their place in their hometown. He recently got married and goes everywhere with his wife. Said I should bring you along next time I travel. I frowned instantly, my excitement deflating like air from a punctured balloon. Not only did I feel uncomfortable in political spaces, I really didn't want to abandon my baby here in Oka. Arinze quickly read my countenance. Don't worry. Chidera can stay with Patience, my sister. We'll come back, max 3 days. I didn't respond. He reached for my hand. Besides, don't you also need a break? My wife shouldn't be relegated to only home affairs. You're a graduate too, he teased, chuckling. I smiled reluctantly. Maybe he was right. Maybe I needed this break. Maybe I needed to meet new people, make new friends, be in a different class from the women at the CWO meeting. But honestly, nothing, nothing at all prepared me for what and who I'd meet at that dinner party. You may think it is cliche, but sometimes the world plays tricks on us, and it does look like a story out of a novel. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was standing with Arinze in the living room of a mansion, his arm lightly brushing mine, the air filled with warm laughter, clinking glasses, and the gentle hum of jazz music playing in the background. He was introducing me to his friends one by one, smiling proudly as he said things like, This is my wife, and receiving a chorus of approving compliments like, Our wife, and Oga, you do well. I smiled graciously, nodding, laughing where expected, until the door opened. Two unexpected people walked in, and just like that, my world stopped spinning. It was no other but Zion and God, Victoria. My heart punched against my ribs. I went cold. My fingers tightened around the fabric of Arinze's black suit, as if it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. My knees wobbled slightly, but I didn't fall. Our eyes locked, Victoria and me. Her face froze the moment she saw me, like time had pressed pause on just the two of us in that crowded, glittering room. I couldn't breathe. I could see the panic in her eyes, the disbelief, the way her chest rose sharply, as if she'd been holding her breath since she walked through the door. Without a word, she turned and walked out toward what I assumed was the balcony. Honey, Arinze said, pulling me back to the present with his deep, cheerful voice. This is the PA to the governor, Zion Oputa. Zion extended his hand with a curious smile, studying my face. You look very familiar. Have we met before? He asked, gripping my hand with a firm shake. Before I could respond, he tilted his head slightly and said, Sandra! Sandra! A beautiful woman emerged from the same balcony Victoria had disappeared into. Her gait was elegant, her smile bright. Yes, darling, she answered sweetly as she approached him and gave him a light kiss on the lips. Zion turned to us again. Sandra, this is Mr. Arinze Chuku and his wife. So he's the business partner I've been telling you about. He gestured between us, his eyes flickering between Sandra and me. We men will be having some important discussions regarding business, he continued smoothly. So I would like you to, you know, make her feel at home. You women can have your own meeting upstairs or wherever. Entertain them. And where is my cousin? She's on the balcony, Sandra replied casually, but her eyes flicked over me, head to toe, like she was measuring something more than just my dress. She turned to me with a radiant grin. Hi, how are you doing? I'm Sandra, and you? Nice to meet you. Um, I struggled to say my name, my mind still tangled in the sight of Victoria. I'm Ifunanya. Sandra smiled knowingly and took my hand playfully. Come on, Ifunanya, let's go get some fresh air. That room can get stuffy with all their political grammar. She led me toward the balcony, her hand lightly wrapped around mine. My legs felt heavy with dread, anticipation, and a thousand questions that had haunted me for years. And here she was again, Victoria, leaning slightly over the railing, a lit cigar nestled between her fingers, a half full glass of red wine in the other. She looked the same, too much the same. Anything you'd like to drink? Sandra asked me. Just a glass of wine, I said quickly, trying to sound steady, like my insides weren't melting. As soon as Sandra turned away, Victoria looked at me, straight into me. My breath hitched. I didn't even realize I'd been holding it. I didn't know what I was expecting our first meeting to feel like after so many years. But not this. Not this ache in my chest. Not this stillness. Not this overwhelming storm that looked like calm. Her eyes still sparkled. Her skin still glowed under the soft lights. And her lips, those lips, I had kissed only one day, one night of forbidden passion. My fingers curled instinctively, remembering their softness. She was the first to speak, and her voice was smooth, casual, almost teasing. Wasn't expecting to see you back there, love. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Don't call me that. But why? She asked, her voice soft, almost curious. Aren't you Ifunanya? Ifunanya means love, right? You don't have the right to talk to me after ignoring my letters for so many years, I snapped, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. My voice cracked at the end. She turned fully now, her brows pulling together. Her eyes glistened, not just from the reflection of the night lights. Is that what you think played out? She asked quietly. That I willfully ignored your letters? That I just forgot you? Her eyes trembled with restrained emotion. Is that how lowly you think of me? Love? She stepped closer, just enough for her hand to brush my arm. That touch, that light familiar touch that stayed with me long after she pulled away. Don't call me that. Don't refer to me as that, I whispered, my throat tightening. I'm married, I added with a choked voice. With a daughter. She froze. What? She asked, her voice almost breaking. She took a shaky step back and downed her wine like it was water. You are joking, right? I'm not. My eyes burned. Why didn't you ever write back? Why, Victoria? Before she could answer, Sandra returned with a bottle of wine and two glasses, smiling as if the air wasn't thick with pain and ghosts. I wiped my face quickly, standing at the far end of the railing, pretending to admire the night sky. I think I need to lie down, Victoria said suddenly, placing her glass down and walking away without another word. Sandra let out a soft laugh and turned to me. Don't mind my sister in law, she said. I hope she wasn't tormenting you with her US talk. Since she got back this year, she's been all over what she went through. Though she did suffer in the hands of the traffickers. What? I breathed, my voice barely audible. Sandra looked at me, surprised by my reaction. She was trafficked? I asked again, more firmly this time. Sandra nodded, sipping her wine with a sad smile. Yes, old story. It's a long one, but we are just glad to have her back. My husband thought she was dead. Her sisters, too. Even her father. That old man you see resting at the far end of the living room. That is her father. I turned to look at Sandra like she had just slapped me. The remaining 2 days we had to spend in Zion's home were more than tormenting. Victoria's room was just beside Arinze and I. Sometimes in the mornings, we'd accidentally walk into each other in the hallway on the way downstairs for breakfast. Those brief, jarring moments felt like mini earthquakes beneath my skin. Her eyes would lock on mine, then dart away, but not before I caught the flicker of something: regret, longing, pain, and sometimes, just sometimes, I thought I saw her tremble a little, especially when she saw Arinze by my side, laughing with me, touching my shoulder, pulling out my chair at the dining table like we were the perfect little couple. I would feel her eyes burning through me when he placed his palm on my back or when he fed me a spoonful of scrambled eggs just to be playful. On the last night before our departure, Arinze was unusually excited, way too excited, considering we were guests in someone else's home. Babe, he whispered, nudging me as we settled under the guest room sheets. I don't know what Zion put in that wine tonight, but I feel good. I chuckled lightly and shook my head. You are tipsy. I'm not. I'm just in love. Can't I be excited to be next to my wife? I tried to keep my voice light. We're in someone else's house. Behave. He wrapped his arm around my waist. Come on now. It's not like we're going to wake the whole house. But my thoughts weren't on waking the house. They were on Victoria, just a wall away. Her presence pressed against me like a memory that wouldn't fade. I'm really tired, Arinze, I said gently, pushing his hand away. He smirked. Don't start. After all that giggling downstairs, you now want to form holy. I laughed despite myself. He always had a way of breaking through my walls. His teasing, his little jokes, they made me forget just long enough to smile. And maybe that was the problem. The next morning, we were packed and ready to leave. Our bags lined the hallway. Zion came downstairs, still tying the belt of his robe, when he suddenly stopped and squinted at me. Wait a minute, he said. You, you were Victoria's very close friend in the university, weren't you? My breath caught in my chest. I turned slowly to Arinze, who raised a curious brow, then back to Zion. Zion looked genuinely puzzled. But I haven't even seen the two of you talk since you got here. You've been acting like strangers. Did something happen? Did you two quarrel? Before I could respond, Arinze chuckled and waved his hand dismissively. Don't mind women. You know how it is with them. Small thing and boom. Silent treatments. Zion laughed and nodded in agreement. But I stood there, my smile strained, my lips too stiff to respond. The drive back to Oka was unusually quiet. Arinze tapped the steering wheel with his thumb. I didn't know you knew Zion's cousin, honey. Why didn't you say anything? I stared out the window. Oh, it's like you said. We fell off. We don't really talk anymore. He glanced at me quickly, then back at the road. Was it that serious? I mean, I'll be working with her on this project. You know it's going to take some time. I forced a laugh. Don't worry, Arinze. It won't affect your work relationship with her. It's just a ladies' thing, nothing too serious. If you say so, he said, though his voice carried a quiet uncertainty. We returned home, and God knows I tried to pretend, to push everything back into the corner of my mind I had sealed for years. But it seemed Victoria's shyness at Zion's place had completely washed off. Her silence had been a storm gathering breath. The following year, I was in the kitchen when the landline rang. The one Arinze finally bought just so he could reach me while traveling. I wiped my hands and picked it up. Hello? There was a pause. Then a familiar voice, fragile and trembling, whispered, Ifunanya. I didn't say anything. She exhaled shakily. It's me. It's Victoria. I felt my knees weaken. My grip on the receiver tightened. Another pause. Then suddenly her voice cracked. I love you. I've never stopped. Not for one day. That night in the hostel, it's the only thing that kept me alive when I was in captive. When I thought, when I thought I'd never get out, I held on to it. Tears spilled freely from my eyes before I could stop them. Victoria, I didn't know. I swear to God, I had no idea what you'd been through. There's no way I could have known. Silence. Then her voice returned, softer. Ifunanya, what happens now? What happens to us? I turned to the sound of tiny giggles. Chidera was sitting on the floor of the living room, playing with her doll. She looked up at me, her curious little eyes watching my tears. I turned away from her and pressed the phone tighter to my ear. I'm married, Victoria, I said, my voice breaking. I have a daughter. We we have to bury it like we always have. Please, don't call me unless it's absolutely necessary. And with that, I hung up the phone. Then I collapsed on the couch and cried, hard, uncontrollably, like the sound of something breaking deep inside me. Arinze continued working and traveling around the country. My husband was rolling with the big men and politicians, getting contracts that ran into hundreds of thousands of naira. And most of the contracts were facilitated by Zion. Victoria had stopped calling. We would meet occasionally when I was with Arinze during his trips, and once she had been in my home in Oka. She and my husband would talk about the projects, and sometimes she would stare at me when my husband wasn't looking and smile. Those moments, they stayed with me longer than they should have. Her smile lingered like perfume in a quiet room, uninvited, but never unwelcome. Things seemed to be on a standstill for a while until that day. It was the first day of August 2002 when I suddenly got a call that changed my life forever. Mrs. Ifunanya Chukwu, the voice on the other end asked. Yes, I replied, uncertain. We are sorry, but where are you now? Are you at home? Yes, I am. Who is this? We are very sorry, Mrs. Ifunanya. Your husband was shot by some hoodlums at the construction site today and was immediately rushed to the hospital. But unfortunately, he passed on before the doctor could do anything. I remember screaming so loud that it felt like my voice tore something open inside me. Chidera, a few days shy of her fifth birthday, ran in and grabbed me by the waist, eyes wide in confusion. Mommy, what's wrong? What happened? I couldn't speak. I broke down in front of her, sobbing uncontrollably, holding on to her like she was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. She began to cry too, her tiny arms clinging to me tightly. How do you tell a child that the only father she's ever known won't be coming home again? Condolences started pouring in. Women from the CW came in their white lace uniforms and blue headscarves, humming soft hymns and clutching rosaries. My family members traveled to Oka and stayed for days, filling the house with prayers, cooking, whispers, and long silences. 3 weeks after the dust had begun to settle, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, it was Zion, Sandra, and Victoria. Victoria immediately fell into my arms, her face buried in my neck as her tears soaked into my blouse. I didn't realize how much I had missed her scent until it filled me all over again. I began to cry too, our sobs folding into one another like waves crashing on a shore. I was there, love, she whispered shakily. Those monsters, they were after Zion. They thought Arinze was Zion. I pulled back and stared at her, stunned. Zion's face tightened with guilt. I should have told him not to go without me, he said. He insisted. I was meant to be there. Sandra touched my arm gently. It wasn't his fault, Ifunanya. None of this was fair. The trio stayed with me and Chidera for 2 days. Victoria wouldn't let me lift a finger. She baited Chidera, helped with cooking, made sure I ate even when my throat refused to cooperate. Her presence filled the hollow corners Arinze's death had left behind, without asking for permission. Before they left, Zion handed me a card. Call the number when you feel strong enough, he said softly. It's a friend of mine. He'll help you get a proper job. Steady pay. I made sure of that. I nodded, fingers trembling as I took it. But just as Sandra and Zion prepared to leave, Victoria turned to me and said, I would like to stay back a while, just to be here for you, if you let me. I hesitated. My mind said no, but my heart was silent, and silence can be just as loud. I didn't like the sound of it, but then again, I felt a little bit powerless to make that a protest. Staying with Victoria was weird at first. We danced around each other in the house like strangers who remembered being lovers. She moved through the space as if she had already belonged there, her hands familiar with the kitchen, her voice soft in the evenings as she read to Chidera or helped her with her alphabet. There were quiet nights where I'd catch her staring at me across the dinner table, and I'd pretend not to notice. Other times, she would reach for something beside me and let her fingers graze my hand, too brief to be anything, and yet too much to be nothing. They say you cannot keep goat and yam in the same vicinity and expect the yam to survive. Eventually, the goat will feast. And I should have known that long before I let Victoria stay under the same roof. But grief has a way of numbing common sense. The nights were always the worst. After the condolence visits faded and the soup pots had stopped steaming and the house returned to silence, grief became a blanket that either smothered me or left me shivering. It was on one of those nights that it happened. I was lying beside Chidera in the room that used to belong to Arinze and me. Her tiny body was curled up against mine, her chest rising and falling softly. I had tried to sleep. Really, I did. But the wind howled strangely, and something about the air felt off. I sat up, rubbing my arms. The windows were open. I hadn't even noticed earlier. I got up and shut them gently, watching as the blinds swayed, then fell still. The cold had crept into the room, and so I tucked the blankets around Chidera's shoulders, brushing her little forehead with a kiss. But when I returned to bed, sleep refused to come. I tossed, turned, counted my breaths, but my mind kept drifting to the woman downstairs. She was just in the guest room, just downstairs. Maybe I should go check if her windows were shut too. It would be awful if she caught a cold under my roof. That was the excuse I told myself. I slipped my feet into my slippers and padded quietly out of the room. The house was silent, the kind of silence that listens back. I crept down the staircase, gently opened the guest room door. Victoria was already awake. She turned, startled, then softened when she saw it was me. Ifunanya. Her voice was sleepy, tender. Are you okay? I should have nodded and left it at that. I should have said, just checking your windows. But I didn't say a word. I stared at her. She stared back. And before either of us could question it, before shame or grief or reason could step between us, our mouths crashed into each other like waves against rocks. It was desperate, raw, years of buried feelings, unanswered questions, quiet stares, stolen glances, all rising to the surface like a tide. I stepped fully into the room and she shut the door behind me. And then we collapsed. Our hands fumbled in the dark, our breaths tangled, our bodies found each other like they had been waiting to do so for far too long. We didn't speak until we did. I missed you, she murmured between kisses, voice broken and full. I hated you, I confessed breathlessly, for walking away back then. I never walked away, she whispered. There, on the floor of a borrowed room, in a house still filled with the scent of loss, we made the most passionate love, like never before. It should have felt wrong, but it didn't. It felt like truth, until I heard a soft cry. Mommy, Chidera. I panicked. My body jerked away from Victoria's. I grabbed my wrapper and stepped out quickly to find my daughter standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Why is it dark, Mommy? She asked in a sleepy whimper. I scooped her into my arms. I'm here. You just had a bad dream. Let's go back to bed. I tucked her in, watched her breathe softly again, and then I returned to Victoria. No words, just more of the same. More confessions, more need, more love. She whispered things that night like we were confessing to God, like the world was going to end before morning. And maybe, in a way, it did. The morning after that night was quiet, uncomfortably so. Victoria was already in the kitchen when I came down, wrapped in one of my old wrappers, her hair tied in a lazy bun. She moved through the space with a strange ease, like she belonged, like nothing had happened. Good morning, she said, without turning fully. Morning, I replied, barely meeting her eyes. We never spoke about that night, not directly, but the silence between us was heavy, like something delicate was hanging above our heads, one wrong word away from shattering. That was how it went, for weeks, until she had to leave. It was years later. One of Zion's men came to the house on his way through town. We sat beneath the mango tree in my compound, drinking malt and talking about work, life, how time had moved. That's when he said it. I still think about Arinze. It wasn't supposed to be him, you know. Victoria got warned not to go to the site that day. I blinked, confused. Warned? Yes. Someone passed a message. Some boys were planning an attack on Zion. She was told not to go, but she didn't take it seriously. My mouth went dry. I couldn't feel my legs beneath me. Are you sure about this? He nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. She didn't mean harm. She just didn't believe it was real. I didn't say a word after that. I sat in silence. a storm brewing in my chest. Time passed. I moved on. I focused on raising Chidera, taking comfort in her laughter and her stubborn little questions. And somehow, God sent help. Through Sister Caro, I was connected to a woman at the Federal Secretariat in Anambra who offered me a modest role. It wasn't much, but it fed us, clothed us, carried us. It gave Chidera the future Arinze would have wanted. Sister Caro never knew about Victoria, not fully. She only knew the skeleton of the story that had once been entangled with a woman. To her, that alone was a disgrace I had narrowly escaped. I'm just glad you came back to your senses, she said once. I always prayed you'd be delivered from that confusion. I smiled faintly, pretending her words didn't cut deeper than they should. She grew even more invested in Chidera, teaching her to sing hymns, coaching her for Bible recitations, dragging her to every church youth gathering possible. She believed she was fixing what had once gone wrong in me through my daughter. But life has its own irony, a slow, cruel kind. The day the call came, I was just about to step out for lunch. My phone rang. Hello, Mrs. Ifunanya Chuku. Yes, this is student affairs at your daughter's university. You've been listed as next of kin. We need you to come in immediately. It's about Chidera. My heart sank. What happened? There's been a serious disciplinary matter. Please come to campus today. That was all they said. I drove like a ghost, my hands on the wheel, my mind in 100 different directions. But nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into. In the disciplinary hall, under the stale glow of flickering lights, I saw her, Chidera, sitting beside another girl. The staff introduced her as Amaka. A roommate had walked in on them in a compromising moment in the hostel. They were both suspended, stripped of hostel accommodation immediately. I sobbed the entire way home. To anyone watching from the outside, it probably looked like I was just a heartbroken mother, disappointed in her daughter's actions. But it was more than that. Far more. It felt like the world had folded in on itself, like everything I had buried, everything I had condemned, everything I had survived had found its way back to me through the child I had. I looked at Chidera, curled up in the seat beside me, and something inside me shattered. Not because she had loved a girl, no, but because I knew exactly what that meant. And for all the years I had tried to tell myself that what happened with Victoria was a mistake, a phase, something I had to repent from. The truth stared at me in the face again, in my daughter's face. And all I could think, shamefully, silently, was, how did I raise someone who followed the same disgusting paths I tried so hard to erase? I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it, and I hated myself for that. I never responded to Victoria's calls after she left my home that day. Then one day, I heard from someone that she had finally left the country, for Cyprus this time. I wasn't surprised. Victoria was always searching for something the world never quite gave her. It's been many years since then. Now, I'm lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is how it ends for me. The doctor used words I'm still trying to digest: chronic, terminal, advanced. I nodded quietly when he said them, like I was signing a contract I'd never read. I don't even know if I'll make it out of here. Sometimes I lay awake at night thinking about Chidera. I want to tell her everything, but what would be the point? I just hope, truly hope, that she doesn't make the same mistakes. Love was never enough. It was complicated. It never fit cleanly into any box. So I chose duty. I chose mutual respect. I chose society's applause over the sound of my own heart beating. And maybe that was right for me. Maybe it wasn't. The other night, I don't know if I was dreaming or hallucinating, but I felt her, Victoria, standing by the edge of my hospital bed, her perfume lingering, her eyes soft. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with the same expression she wore the first night we kissed. And I could have sworn I heard her whisper, I still love you. I always will. Maybe it was just my mind. Or maybe love never really dies. It just changes shape. In a warm house oceans away from Nigeria, Chidera now lived a life Ifunanya never could. She sat curled on a couch one evening with her lover, Amaka. Chidera, do you ever regret choosing this life over what could have been in Nigeria with Uchenna? Of course I don't, Amaka. I'm happy I chose my heart and my happiness, my freedom to be myself, to love who completes me. I'm glad I don't have to wake up every morning next to a man I could never connect with. That would have been unfair to him and to myself. She reached out, brushing Amaka's cheek with her thumb. I love you so much. You and our son, Onyeka. You complete me fully. Amaka smiled, her eyes glistening. Oh, Chidera, I love you so much. Onyeka, who had been sleeping all this while, stared awake and staggered toward Amaka's lap. Chidera laughed gently as she brushed his cheek, then looked into Amaka's eyes. To forever, she whispered. To forever, Amaka replied. They shared a kiss as the lights slowly faded.